All right, so what kind of data do we get out of this? Well, the brain's a complicated place. If we think about this pizza and what the little modules are in the pizza, if you remember when I showed you the computer chip, there was a bunch of little different colored modules on that computer chip. Estimates are that on the surface of the flattened brain, there are something on the order of maybe 200 to 300 distinct brain areas. Each one of them is doing a different job. The visual system alone has, say, somewhere between 50 to 75 distinct areas. And early visual areas represent fairly simple aspects of the world, like little edges and features and texture and patches of color. And higher order brain areas represent more abstract information about the world, like a higher brain area might know where people are in this room and whether people are a woman or a man, but it wouldn't know exactly what they look like. And so bear with me. I'm going to do an experiment, it's always kind of scary to do a demo. I don't know if this is going to work, but let's play a little demo here, which is not working right now. Oh, there it is. OK, so this is a demo. This is a flattened brain. And we can go through and we can draw the labels and the regions of interest on this brain. So these little drawn-in areas are just the areas that we know about in the brain. And some of these are too big, like this area, this patch here has 2 auditory areas, and it's probably something like 3 or 4. These areas up here, these are the motor system, this is the somatosensory system, these are the visual areas, these are the early visual areas here, these are the high order visual areas around here. This is some speech stuff, there's speech stuff kind of all over the place. And now we can actually have people say, listen to stories, and we can build a model of their brain, and we can go through at each point in the brain, and we can actually recover the information that that part of the brain represents. And so we made this little brain browser so you can just click on things and look. So if we click on this light blue patch here, for example, I don't know what it does. So on here, this is just a word space that tells us, that organizes all of the nouns and verbs in the English language in a low-dimensional space so that we can look at it. And this tells us what this particular part of the brain cares about. And red means that this part of the brain, when these terms appear in a story, this bold activity, the blood flow in this part of the brain is increased, and blue, when you see it, means that activity is decreased, and the size of the word indicates the amount of increase or decrease, and this correlation value tells you, essentially it's not corrected, but it will be pretty close to the proportion of variance that the language in this part of the brain accounts for. This is a non-language part of the brain here. I'm just clicked on, but you can see that it cares about places and times. Afternoon, early, town, waste, car, west, sorry. Train, highway, yard, road, arrived. It's a placey area. If you click on here on another light blue patch, it's probably also placey. Well, it's time, morning, but it's also some nouns, dress, dressed, shoes, white, black, table. And it's inhibited by talk, think, thinking, sorry, lose, don't. Let's see if we click here in another light blue place. OK, this one prefers time. Time terms, afternoon, 11, 9 o'clock, 6, 8, quarter, 4. And it's suppressed by any more, don't, understand, sense, stupid. So it's like cognitive variables. Okay? Now there's 30,000 points that we measure on this brain, and you can go through and have a heck of a time just clicking on things. The colors here actually mean something. The colors are our estimate of the similarity of the different points in the brain inside this semantic space. Yes? This is from English language speakers, but the weird thing is my lab's full of bilinguals. So I think I'm the only English language speaker, and I'm too nearsighted to even go in the magnet anymore. So these are mostly bilinguals. And of course, how this speech information is distributed across cortex is an ongoing area of research in my lab and other people's labs. So you can see. Sorry? Is my speaker not? Oh, I'm just not talking into it. I apologize. I could turn it up, or I can just do what I do with a large lecture of 200 students and yell, which will keep me awake. So it has 2 purposes. All right, the question was, are these native English speakers or bilinguals? And my comment was, these are bilinguals, but we're not really looking here for, the substructure of how speech is represented. I'm just kind of showing you that there's a lot of information, right? Basically, any of these colored parts has information about speech, speech terms. So you can just sort of click around here forever, and you can see just by the distribution of colors that there's a lot of information that you can get if you want to spend the time playing with it. And you can imagine that if you actually have all of these different terms, mapped onto the brain from people listening to stories. Then, when you play somebody a story, you can look and see what parts of the brain were activated, and you can essentially infer which of these nouns and verbs appeared in the story, right? And you can decode the story. Now, this is taken from people actually listening to stories. But you can imagine this isn't that far from somebody just talking to themselves. So, I mean, really, what's the difference between you hearing somebody telling you a story and you telling yourself a story? Well, for most normal humans, there must be some difference. Because if you couldn't tell any difference at all between people telling you a story and you telling yourself a story, then you would not know the difference between the external world and the internal world, and then they would probably put you away in a hospital somewhere. So most people, there must be some difference in the brain between these two states. But on the other hand, it would be kind of silly to have two completely different representations of the world for stories heard in the external world and stories that you tell yourself. So probably there's going to be a lot of correspondence. So you can imagine that building a model like this for speech on an individual brain would allow you to actually decode internal covert speech from that same person. And this is reflecting again what I said about the symmetry of encoding and decoding models. If we can build an encoding model that tells us what each part of the brain represents in terms of these nouns and verbs, we can use it to decode the information when we see a certain pattern.